I have always trusted my husband, Martin. We have been married for 8 years, and I thought our life together was perfect. I have two children, a boy and a girl, and I take care of them while Martin works hard at his job. He always told me how much he loved me, how much he appreciated everything I did for the family. I believed him. He was always kind and thoughtful, and I never had any reason to question our marriage. But that changed one afternoon when I was cleaning our house. It was a normal day, and I was picking up the clothes from the bedroom. I found one of Martin's jackets lying on the chair near the bed. It was his favorite jacket, the one he wore when he went out with his friends. I picked it up and started to hang it in the closet when a small piece of paper fell from the pocket. It was just a little note, but something about it made me stop and look closer. I opened it slowly, my fingers shaking. The paper was folded in half, and when I opened it, I saw a phone number written on it. I didn't recognize it. I stared at the number for a long time, feeling a strange sense of panic rising in my chest. Why was this number in his jacket? He never mentioned anyone new at work. He never talked about meeting anyone outside of our usual group of friends. At first, I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe it was a number for work or a business contact. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I felt a wave of unease flood over me. My heart started to beat faster, and my mind raced. Could it be that Martin was hiding something from me? Could he be seeing someone else? The thought was unbearable. I loved him. I trusted him. But now I wasn't sure if I knew him at all. I tried to ignore the feeling, but it wouldn't go away. I couldn't stop thinking about that phone number. What if he was having an affair? What if he didn't love me the way he said he did? I felt sick to my stomach just thinking about it, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to know the truth. The next day, when Martin went to work, I decided to investigate. I told myself I wasn't going to find anything. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew I had to check. I went to his jacket again, hoping maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But the note was still there. I took a deep breath and decided to look at his phone. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to invade his privacy, but I felt like I had no choice. I waited until the house was quiet, and then I picked up his phone. Martin always left his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to work. I never touched it before, but now I needed to see if there was anything that could explain the number. I unlocked the phone and started looking through his messages. The first few messages were normal. They were from his coworkers, friends, and family. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. There were messages from a woman I didn't recognize. They were friendly at first, but as I scrolled down, I saw that the tone of the messages changed. They were more personal. I felt my hands shaking as I kept reading. My heart pounded in my chest. The woman called him by his nickname, and they talked about meeting after work. They joked about how much fun they had together. It was clear they had been spending time together. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I kept reading, even though every part of me screamed to stop. I couldn't help it. I had to know. The messages were full of details about their meetings, where they went, what they did, how much they enjoyed each other's company. I felt like the ground was slipping away beneath me. How could this be happening? Martin was supposed to love me. We had a family together. Why was he doing this? I didn't know what to think anymore. I felt betrayed, confused, and angry. How could he lie to me like this? How could he be seeing another woman? I wanted to confront him right then and there, but I knew I couldn't. I wasn't ready. I needed more proof. I needed to be sure. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept thinking about what I had read. I felt numb. My mind kept going back to the messages, to the phone number, to the fact that Martin had been hiding something from me for so long. I tried to pretend everything was normal when Martin came home, but it was impossible. My thoughts were all over the place. I felt like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. That night, after the children went to bed, I lay awake next to Martin. I could hear him breathing softly beside me, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I didn't know how I was supposed to look at him again. I didn't know how I was supposed to trust him after what I had discovered. The next morning, I made a decision. I had to know the truth. I couldn't live with this doubt anymore. I couldn't pretend everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. I didn't know what would happen after I found out the truth, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that nothing was wrong. I was scared. I was terrified of what Martin might say. I was scared of losing him, scared of what this would do to our family. But I couldn't keep living in the dark. I needed to know if I was the only woman in his life, or if he was lying to me. I needed to know if I could ever trust him again. That afternoon, when Martin left for work, I went back to his phone. I went through his messages again, hoping I was wrong, but I wasn't. The affair was real. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. Martin had been seeing someone else, and now I had to face the truth. I felt broken. My heart was heavy, and I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. The truth had to come out, and I had to decide if I could live with it. The next few days were the hardest days of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had found on Martin's phone. The messages kept playing in my head over and over again. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was the woman he had been talking to, the way he had been lying to me. It felt like everything I knew about my life had been turned upside down. I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't stop myself from thinking about the affair. I kept wondering who she was. How long had it been going on? Had he ever really loved me? Maybe everything had been a lie. The pain was unbearable. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to tell my friends or family because I was ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know that my husband had been cheating on me. I didn't know what I was supposed to do or where to turn. I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I decided to look for more clues. I told myself it was the only way to understand what had been going on. I couldn't move forward until I had all the answers. But each time I thought about it, I felt even worse. I didn't want to invade his privacy, but the need to know the truth was stronger than my guilt. That afternoon, when Martin went to work, I went back to his jacket. I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know more. Maybe there was something else hidden inside his clothes, something that could explain everything. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking as I searched through his jacket again. I felt like I was doing something terrible, but I couldn't stop. I found nothing in his jacket, but I remembered something. Martin had left his work bag on the kitchen table that morning. It was a big leather bag he always carried. He never took it with him when he went out, but I knew he kept his important things in it. His work phone, his wallet, his keys. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I needed to check. I opened the bag and started searching through it. At first, I didn't find anything unusual. There were some papers, a few receipts, and his lunchbox. But then, hidden at the bottom of the bag, I found a small notebook. It was a plain notebook with a black cover. I didn't know what to think. I slowly opened it and began reading. The notebook was filled with handwritten notes. At first, it looked like just regular work notes, but as I flipped through the pages, I saw something strange. There were names and dates written down, along with other details I didn't understand. Some of the names were familiar, but one name caught my eye. It was the name of the woman from the messages, the same woman who had been sending him text messages. I felt my stomach twist as I read more. The notebook was filled with information about their meetings, where they had gone, what they had done. I felt sick. My hands trembled as I read the words. He had been keeping track of their meetings. It wasn't just a simple mistake or a one-time thing. This had been going on for a long time. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of everything. Why had he been doing this? Why hadn't he told me the truth? I had so many questions, but no answers. I closed the notebook and sat down at the kitchen table. My heart was heavy and my thoughts were clouded. I had no idea what to do next. Should I confront him right away? Should I wait until I knew more? I felt so confused. I didn't want to believe that this was happening, but the evidence was right in front of me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day, I decided to keep searching. I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know more. I needed to understand everything before I made any decisions. I spent hours going through Martin's things. I went through his emails, his phone records, even his online accounts. I found more signs of the affair, more messages, more dates, more secrets. The more I found, the worse I felt. It was clear that he had been hiding this from me for a long time. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't something that just happened. He had been lying to me every day. The days started to blur together. I was so focused on finding the truth that I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't stop thinking about Martin and the woman. I couldn't stop thinking about what this all meant for my family. How could I live with a man who had betrayed me like this? How could I trust him again? I felt more and more alone. I couldn't talk to Martin. I couldn't tell anyone what I had found. I was too ashamed to share my pain. I felt like I was carrying this heavy burden all by myself. But I couldn't keep it to myself forever. I knew I had to make a decision soon. I couldn't keep living in this kind of pain. At night, when Martin was home, everything felt strange. I looked at him and I didn't recognize him anymore. I didn't know who he was. The man I had loved and trusted seemed like a stranger. The pain in my chest grew bigger each day. How could I live with him after what I knew? How could I forgive him for everything he had done? but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just leave him. We had children together. We had a life together. I didn't want to break up our family, but I didn't know how to move forward. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't keep hiding my feelings, pretending everything was fine. I needed to confront Martin. I needed to talk to him. I didn't know what I would say or how I would say it, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the dark. That night, after the children went to bed, I sat in the living room alone. I stared at the clock, waiting for Martin to come home. I was nervous, my hands shaking as I tried to think about what I would do. The truth had to come out. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was okay. The time had come for me to face the truth. And no matter how hard it was, I knew I had to do it. The days after I found the notebook were a blur. Every moment felt heavy, and my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I had so many emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and fear. I couldn't believe that Martin had been hiding this from me for so long. He was still the man I loved, but everything had changed. I didn't know who he was anymore. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to know the truth, and I had to hear it from him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was normal. I needed answers, even if they were painful. That night, Martin came home late from work. It had been a long day, and I felt my heart beating faster with every step he took toward the door. I could see him smiling, like everything was fine. But I couldn't smile. I couldn't pretend anymore. I knew I had to confront him. I waited until he sat down on the couch. He asked me how my day was, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too scared, too angry. I was shaking inside, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to ask him. I felt the words in my throat, but they wouldn't come out. It was like I couldn't breathe. My mind was full of so many thoughts, and I didn't know where to begin. But I couldn't hold it in any longer. I had to say it. Finally, I took a deep breath. I couldn't look at him. I was too afraid of what I might see in his eyes. Asked him about the messages, about the woman I had found in his phone. I told him I knew everything. I told him I had found the notebook, the details of their meetings, and I couldn't keep living with the lies. I told him I knew he had been cheating on me. There was a long silence. For a moment, I thought maybe he would deny it, tell me I was wrong. But he didn't. He just sat there looking down at his hands. I felt my heart break in that moment. I wanted him to explain, to tell me it wasn't true, but I already knew. I already knew that everything had changed. He told me the truth. He didn't try to deny it. He told me that he had been seeing someone else for months. He said it started out as a mistake, but it became something more. He said he never meant to hurt me, that he loved me and our family, but he got caught up in the excitement of the affair. I didn't know what to say. His words felt like a knife in my chest. I had trusted him. I had loved him with everything I had, and now he was telling me this. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, and I felt like I might cry, but I didn't want to cry in front of him. I wanted to be strong, but I felt weak. My whole world had fallen apart. He tried to explain more, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear any more lies or excuses. I didn't care about the reasons anymore. The truth was simple. He had betrayed me. He had hurt me in the worst way possible, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive him. I stood up and walked away. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with him after what he had said. I needed to be alone. I needed time to think, to process everything. I felt dizzy, like I was losing control. I went to the bedroom and sat on the bed, my hands covering my face. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run away, but I didn't know where to go. The only thing I knew was that everything was different now. I didn't know if I could trust him again, or if I even wanted to. Martin came into the room after a while. He stood in the doorway, looking at me with sadness in his eyes. He said he was sorry, that he never meant to hurt me, but his words didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. I didn't know if I could ever look at him the same way. I didn't know if I could ever love him the same way. I told him I needed space. I needed time to think. I couldn't make any decisions in that moment. My mind was spinning, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I could stay with him or if I should leave. Martin didn't argue. He said he understood. I could see the pain in his eyes, but it didn't matter. I felt the pain too. I felt like my heart had been torn in two. How could he do this to me? How could he throw away everything we had? I lay in bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything. I thought about the good times we had shared, the memories we had made, and I wondered how those memories could now feel so fake. How could everything be so different now? How could I go back to being the woman I was before? The next morning, I woke up early. I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know who Martin was anymore. I needed to talk to someone, but I couldn't. I couldn't tell my friends. I couldn't tell my family. I was too ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know the truth. I didn't want them to know that Martin had been cheating on me. But as I sat there, alone in the quiet house, I realized something. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this kind of pain. I needed to decide if I could forgive Martin and try to rebuild our marriage, or if it was time to walk away. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to face it. I knew I couldn't stay stuck in this place of hurt and confusion. Whatever I chose, I needed to move forward. I needed to take control of my own life again. The time had come to make a choice. I didn't know what I would do, but I knew I couldn't stay in the dark anymore. The truth had come out, and now it was time to face it. The next few days felt like they were dragging on forever. Every morning I woke up and felt a weight in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop thinking about Martin and the affair. I kept asking myself questions I didn't have answers to. Could I forgive him? Should I stay with him? Or should I leave and start over? The decision was too hard, and my mind couldn't stop running in circles. I spent most of my days alone, walking around the house in a kind of fog. I couldn't focus on anything. The kids noticed I wasn't myself. They asked why I looked sad, Why I wasn't laughing like I used to. I hated that they could see it, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I was falling apart inside, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Martin tried to talk to me every chance he got, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I wanted to talk to him. I didn't know if I even wanted to look at him. The man I thought I knew, the man I had loved for so long, now seemed like a stranger. How could I continue living with him, knowing what he had done? How could I trust him again? He told me over and over that he was sorry. He said he would do anything to make it right, to fix the damage he had caused. But his words didn't matter. They didn't take away the pain I felt. They didn't take away the feeling of betrayal. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could change. But deep down, I wasn't sure if I could forgive him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was scared. I was scared of being alone. I was scared of losing my family. I didn't want to break up our home, but I didn't know how to stay with him either. I was trapped in my own feelings. I didn't want to live like this, but I didn't know what else to do. The turning point came when I decided to visit my sister. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge me. I needed to get away from the house and clear my head. My sister was always there for me, and I knew she would understand. I called her one morning and told her I was coming over. I didn't tell her what was happening yet. I didn't know how to explain everything to her. When I arrived at her house, I felt a small sense of relief. Being away from the house, even for a short time, gave me some space. My sister could tell I wasn't okay as soon as she saw me. She asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I started crying. I cried for what felt like hours. I cried for the pain I was feeling, for the hurt Martin had caused, and for the confusion I had inside. I cried because I didn't know what to do. My sister hugged me and let me cry. She didn't say anything at first. She just let me be. When I calmed down, she asked me to tell her what had happened. It felt good to talk to someone, to get the words out. I told her everything, the messages, the notebook, the affair. I told her about how Martin had betrayed me and how I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. I told her how scared I was to make the wrong choice. She listened carefully, and when I finished, she took a deep breath. She didn't tell me what to do. Instead, she told me that I needed to take my time. She said it was okay to be confused, that I didn't have to make a decision right away. She told me that whatever choice I made, I had to make it for myself. I couldn't stay in a marriage just because I was scared of being alone. I needed to choose what was best for me, even if it was hard. Her words helped. It wasn't an easy thing to hear, but it made me feel a little better. I realized that I didn't have to make a decision right away. I didn't have to have all the answers. I needed to listen to my feelings and give myself time to heal. After that day, I spent more time with my sister. She helped me think through everything, and I slowly began to feel like I could breathe again. I still didn't have all the answers, but I knew that I needed to think carefully about my future. I couldn't rush into anything. I had to make the right choice for me and for my children. When I returned home, things were still difficult. Martin kept asking me how I was feeling, but I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready to talk to him about everything yet. I wasn't ready to tell him what I had decided. Part of me still wanted to believe that we could fix our marriage, that we could somehow make it work. But another part of me knew that things had changed forever. I wasn't the same person anymore, and neither was Martin. Over the next week, I spent a lot of time thinking. I thought about my marriage, my children, and my own happiness. I asked myself hard questions. Could I forgive him? Could I trust him again? Could I ever look at him the same way? I started to realize that I couldn't just stay with him out of fear or guilt. I needed to find out what I really wanted. It wasn't enough to say I would try to forgive him. I had to feel it. And right now, I wasn't sure I could. The trust between us had been broken, and it wasn't going to be easy to rebuild. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room thinking about everything, I realized something important. I couldn't keep living in this state of confusion. I had to make a decision soon. I needed to decide if I could forgive Martin and move forward with him, or if it was time to let go. The choice was mine, and I had to take control of my own life again. I wasn't sure what would happen next. I wasn't sure what my future held. But I knew one thing: I couldn't live in the dark anymore. I had to face the truth and make a choice, no matter how hard it was. It was time to stop hiding from the pain and start moving forward. The decision wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I had to make it. And no matter what, I had to do what was best for me and for my children. It was time to face the truth and take the next step. It had been a few weeks since I began to think seriously about what I wanted. Every day felt like a struggle. I still wasn't sure about Martin. I still didn't know if I could forgive him. But one thing had become clear: I couldn't keep living in this kind of pain. I couldn't stay in a place of confusion forever. It was time to make a decision, even if I wasn't ready for it. The house felt quiet. The kids were at school, and Martin was at work. I spent a lot of time alone thinking. I had been avoiding Martin, not because I hated him, but because I didn't know how to talk to him. Every time I looked at him, I remembered the pain, the betrayal. It felt like the distance between us had grown too wide, and I didn't know how to close it. But that afternoon, as I sat alone in the living room, something changed. I realized I couldn't keep running from this forever. I couldn't avoid him, and I couldn't hide from my feelings. It wasn't healthy for me or for the kids. I had to face it. I had to talk to Martin, and I had to decide what was next for me. When he came home that evening, I was waiting for him. I was nervous, but I knew it was time. I needed to have the conversation. I needed to tell him what I had been thinking and feeling. As soon as he walked through the door, I could see that he was worried. He could tell that something was different, but he didn't know what. I didn't waste time. I told him that I had been thinking a lot, and I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I told him that I still wasn't sure if I could forgive him, but I knew I couldn't live in this place of uncertainty anymore. I told him that I needed to know if he was willing to do whatever it took to fix our marriage, to rebuild the trust we had lost. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't just sadness or regret. There was a kind of determination there. He told me he was willing to do whatever it took. He promised me that he would change. He said he wanted to fix everything, and he was ready to put in the work. But even as he said these words, I couldn't help but feel a little doubt. I didn't want to be foolish. I didn't want to believe promises that might not be kept. I didn't want to give him another chance if he was just going to hurt me again. I had to think about my children too. They had seen us fight. They had heard the silence between Martin and me. I didn't want them to grow up in a house filled with tension and sadness. I didn't want them to see their parents unhappy. I wanted what was best for them, but I also wanted to protect myself. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Rebuilding trust takes time. It takes effort. I couldn't expect everything to go back to normal overnight. But I also knew that if I didn't give him a chance, I would always wonder what could have been. I would always regret not trying. And I didn't want to live with that regret. I told him that we needed to take it slow. I needed time to see if he was really committed to changing. I couldn't just forgive him right away, but I was willing to give him a chance to prove that he could be the man I once knew. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be days when I wasn't sure if I could keep going, but I was willing to try. Martin agreed. He said he would be patient. He said he understood that it would take time. He told me he loved me and that he was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. The next few days were strange. We were both trying to adjust to this new reality. We talked more, but it wasn't always easy. There were still moments of silence, moments where I didn't know what to say or how to act. There were days when I felt like I couldn't move forward, and days when I felt like we were making progress. We started going to therapy. It was a step in the right direction. I didn't expect it to fix everything, but I knew it was a good start. I knew that we both needed help to work through the pain and the hurt that had built up over time. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was trying to be hopeful. There were good days and bad days. On the good days, I saw a side of Martin that I hadn't seen in a long time. He was kinder, more patient. He listened to me. He didn't try to brush things off or make excuses. On the bad days, it felt like the pain from the past was coming back. It felt like we were taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But even on the difficult days, I kept reminding myself that we were both trying. I wasn't ready to say everything was okay, but I was willing to keep working on it. I was willing to give our family another chance, but I wasn't going to ignore the truth. The trust was broken, and it would take time to rebuild it. I still had my doubts. I still wondered if this was the right decision. But I knew that I couldn't just keep running away from the problem. I couldn't avoid it forever. The truth was, I wanted my family to be happy. I wanted us to heal, but I needed to take it one day at a time. One night, after the kids were asleep, Martin and I sat together on the couch. We didn't say much. We just sat there side by side. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a small step forward. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. The road ahead would be hard, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I also knew that I had to make the choice for myself. I couldn't let fear or anger control my decisions. I had to find a way to move forward, even if it was one small step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to try. It was going to take time and it was going to take work, but I was willing to put in the effort. I wasn't sure if it would all work out, but I knew I had to try. I had to believe that we could rebuild, that we could heal, and that we could find a way to be happy again. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. I had made my decision. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were important. Martin and I continued with therapy. Every session was hard, but it made us talk. It made us understand each other better. Slowly, I could see that Martin was really trying. He was doing things differently, and I began to notice the little changes. He was more attentive, more patient. I could feel that he wanted to make things right, even though it was hard. But even though I could see his efforts, I still had doubts. Trust was not something that could be fixed quickly. There were moments when I felt like I couldn't do it, when the weight of everything felt too much to carry. There were nights when I lay awake in bed, thinking about the past, about everything he had done. It was hard to stop the thoughts that filled my mind. I wondered if I was being foolish for trying to make it work. Maybe it was better to just walk away, to protect myself and my children. Maybe it was too late for us. But then I remembered why I was trying. I was trying because I loved my family. I loved Martin, even though he had hurt me. I wanted us to heal, to be better, but I knew it would take time. I had to be patient with him, but I also had to be patient with myself. I had to forgive him, not just with my words, but with my heart. That was the hardest part. I started to see the small changes in me too. I wasn't as angry as I had been before. I wasn't as bitter. Every day I let go of a little more of the hurt. I was learning to trust again, little by little. It wasn't easy, but I realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending like nothing had happened. Forgiveness was about letting go of the pain, so it didn't control me anymore. One afternoon, I sat outside on the porch, watching the kids play in the yard. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, and everything felt calm. For a moment, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I had been so focused on the pain for so long that I had forgotten what peace felt like. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't like everything was fixed overnight. But that day, I realized something important. I realized that I had the power to choose how I wanted to live. I didn't have to stay stuck in the past. I didn't have to let the pain from Martin's betrayal control me forever. I had the power to decide what was best for me, for my family, and for my future. That evening, Martin came home early. I could tell he was trying to do something special. He had brought home flowers, and he smiled when he saw me. I wasn't sure what to expect. We had been through so much, and I wasn't sure how to feel. But in that moment, I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe we could make it. Maybe we could rebuild. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in the past. I couldn't keep living with all the hurt and anger. It was time to look forward, to give ourselves a chance to grow. I had been given a second chance, and I was ready to make the most of it. Over the next few months, things slowly began to improve. We kept going to therapy, and we worked hard to understand each other. There were still difficult days, but there were also moments of happiness. Slowly, I began to trust Martin again. I could see that he was truly sorry for what he had done, and he was doing everything he could to make things right. I also realized that healing wasn't just about Martin. It was about me too. I had to heal from the hurt, from the betrayal. I had to learn to love myself again. I couldn't just depend on Martin to make me happy. I had to find my own happiness, even in the middle of the pain. As time went on, I found that I was able to forgive him more and more. It didn't happen all at once, but it happened little by little. I started to see Martin in a new light. He wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we were both trying. We were both learning and growing. One day, Martin and I sat together on the couch after the kids had gone to bed. We talked about the future. We talked about what we wanted for our family, for our marriage. It was a simple conversation, but it felt important. We both agreed that we had a long way to go, but we were willing to keep working. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of calm. I didn't know what the future held, but I felt like we were moving in the right direction. We had a long way to go, and there would still be hard days, but I felt hopeful. I knew that we could make it if we kept trying. I had forgiven Martin, and I had forgiven myself. It wasn't the ending I had imagined. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale story, but it was real. It was our story, and we were going to write the next chapter together. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Martin was still by my side. We were still a family. And no matter what happened, I knew that we had a chance to be happy again. I was ready to face the future with hope. I didn't know what challenges it would bring, but I knew that we could face them together. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about building something new, something stronger. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready, ready to move forward, ready to heal, and ready to be happy again. The journey wasn't over, but we were no longer stuck. And that, I realized, was a good place to start.